I'm Matt.
I'm Shane.
And if you like what you hear, make sure you hit that thumbs up button real hard, and make sure you subscribe to Comic Movie Marks.
And also click that little bell for all of the notifications.
Whee!
Always remember,
if Trailer Trash can do it,
anyone can do it.
Hello and welcome everyone to another Comic Movie Marks video.
Scott Derrickson and Marvel have mutually agreed to part ways on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness due to some creative differences. And we are here to discuss potentially what that could mean.
So for once on the Comic Movie Marks channel, we got a little bit of Marvel news. Because this actually, in some sense, is a bigger picture type situation. Directors constantly are leaving projects due to creative differences. Just look at The Flash. I think they're up to like 8 now. And now Marvel has Scott Derrickson leaving Doctor Strange 2 Electric Boogaloo. I like that better than Multiverse of Madness. So Scott Derrickson and Marvel have mutually agreed, both sending out tweets stating that they are separating due to creative differences.
Seems to be the narrative that happens a lot. Creative differences, just didn't work out. I really want to know what goes on behind the scenes. Are these people like yelling at each other? At what point do they decide, oh, we have some, quote, creative differences?
So as some might know, at Comic-Con, Scott Derrickson was pretty adamant that Doctor Strange was going to be the MCU's first horror movie, and they were going to take the Doctor Strange mythos, the IP itself, and turn it upside down and make it something different, a truly scary movie.
I mean, what excites me about Doctor Strange is what made him great in the comics, that he doesn't fight villains from this Earth or even from this universe, but from the multiverse and from other dimensions. So you get into all kinds of psychedelic weirdness, which this movie is going to. But when I came and talked to Kevin about doing a sequel, I said, I don't want to do just another sequel to do a sequel. If I'm going to do it, it has to go into the territory that drew me into the Doctor Strange comics in the first place, which is how they dipped into the gothic and the horror and the horrific, and we're going to make the first scary MCU film.
Yes! Yes! You had me at goth.
Yeah, you know what? No, it's PG-13, you're gonna like it.
This was something Matt and I were actually a little bit more intrigued about. If you are one of our older followers, you will know how excited we were for the original Doctor Strange movie that came out when we started seeing some of the trailers and hearing some of the stuff that came out, and then how disappointed we were when the movie was finally released. So here they go, they're taking another swing at it, another crack at it, and with even the name Multiverse of Madness, it kind of gives you a little bit of a different feel. Like, okay, maybe they are finally going to venture down a different path. Maybe they're going to try something a little bit different than the quote unquote Marvel formula.
What they're promoting here for Multiverse of Madness, something that's actually different than what is in the MCU. In the first Doctor Strange, we all kind of got a little bit of a feeling that Doctor Strange was more of a bootleg Iron Man, and that his personality were pretty similar to it. It was just the magical version. I think we compared it to Harry Potter fucked house. Obviously the bending of the cities, the mirror realm as they called it, it was very intriguing, but it just story-wise, it all fell apart. So again, they're promising something different, something big. Even though Feige was adamant that this wasn't going to be rated R, it was going to be PG-13. So is Marvel putting on the kid gloves again? Is this why they decided to separate from Scott Derrickson over creative differences? Because Scott Derrickson is known for doing rated R horror movies like Sinister, but it's pretty obvious in my eyes that Scott Derrickson knew he was going to have to make a PG-13 horror movie. We've seen PG-13 being able to step it up a little bit when it comes to horror movies lately. Depending on what kind of horror you prefer, it may or may not tickle the tip for your type of horror movies, but it is possible to make a reasonably scary PG-13 horror movie.
Absolutely, especially in the vein of Doctor Strange. You know that it's not going to be full-blown horror, but I think what he was going for was something probably closer to maybe a little bit more suspenseful, and something that maybe is not so kid-friendly and maybe pushing the envelope a little bit more. Still in the same vein of Doctor Strange. From what I've heard, I have not read any Doctor Strange comics, but there are some pretty dark comic books of Doctor Strange. So that sounds like what Derrickson was going to attempt, and lo and behold, here we are.
So obviously there was a lot of ideas that Scott Derrickson and co-writer Robert Cargill had when they were first doing Doctor Strange.
So yeah, no, I mean, it's we're adding the Marvel formula to Doctor Strange and then being allowed to play with the weird stuff. I mean, they're not afraid of the weird stuff. They've kept us grounded in that there were some things, especially our early pitch that we brought in, where they were like, we didn't know this wasn't what we wanted for the first movie, but this proves that the audiences aren't ready for it. And they're like, keep this in mind if we make a second or third film with you, because this is great. We love this, but you can't start here. Like that's convinced us.
So you're gonna be able to put in all these crazy images like we see.
Oh, that's
right.
Right in this film. Yeah, you haven't even seen the batshit crazy stuff.
So this was the weird stuff, the freaky stuff that they wanted to put in that they weren't able to put into the first one. But this is what Marvel told them that they were going to be able to do in the second one. They were going to be able to introduce the audience to this fascinating, weird, batshit crazy world that they wanted to show in Doctor Strange. So what happened? Insert China.
Because you're now making movies for 16-year-olds and China.
Now I know how all the writers in Hollywood feel.
A theory that I have, because a lot of people think that, they're just being kid-friendly. This is something that's fairly unknown by, I think, a lot of people, but China doesn't show a lot of American horror movies. Because of the China restrictions and the China censorship, horror movies aren't widely screened in China.
Flashback to August of 2016, an article from Business Insider talks about Suicide Squad not getting a China release and will take a huge blow in the global box office. The article states the DC blockbuster will not be playing in China as of now. That's a major loss for the film studio, Warner Brothers, since if that holds true, it won't get any bump from the world's second largest film market at the time, when it could use good news among the negative reviews for the film. The article continues, a source familiar with the matter told Business Insider that because of China's censorship of stories with a negative outlook on life, it has passed on including the movie in its upcoming releases. It doesn't help that the movie also has a supernatural aspect, another no-no by the standards of the China Film Co., the state-owned body responsible for the importing and releasing of foreign films in the country.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
That is the issue when it comes to horror movies in China. In 2018, a CGTN article talked about Tang Media teams with Hollywood producer to make horror films for China. And it's basically talking about Jason Blum and Blumhouse Productions and how a lot of their movies haven't been screened in China. But now they're working with a Chinese producer and a Chinese company to make more China-friendly movies. And so this process was going to help produce non-graphic US horror films in China. So China obviously has a huge censorship issue when it comes to horror movies. Changing and altering your vision for a movie, for a PG-13 horror movie, which is already a difficult process as it is, now you have to include China. And we know the mouse is not going to turn down that Chinese dog.
In the article from CGTN, it states China has represented Hollywood's fastest growing segment of the global box office for at least half a decade, but the horror genre, while red hot in North America, has remained nearly non-existent in China. And yes, as Matt stated, there's no way with China having that big of a stranglehold on the box office that Disney is going to forego all of the box office numbers, given that 5 of their last 6 MCU movies have cracked over $1 billion. I'm sure, including Captain Marvel, I know, shocker, I'm sure they want to continue that run, especially with the success of Avengers Endgame, and they are not going to let China dictate that.
Who else wants to go to China and get some of their money? Oh, for crying out loud.
The funny thing is as Marvel pretty much lets their directors go to the wayside when the directors don't do what they want, other studios will actually stand up for their director's vision when it comes to China. An article from January 15th saying Sony stands behind Tarantino's decision not to cut Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for Chinese audiences. And this is what happens when you actually have a chairman, when you have a higher up executive back your filmmaker. This is what it sounds like. This could be just great PR, but this is what I think a lot of people, if you're especially listening to this channel and know how much we appreciate a filmmaker movie, this is what you want to hear from executives at the highest possible levels of these movie studios. Sony Pictures chairman Tom Rothman says, "I think Quentin did the right thing, and he had our support in doing that. Obviously, that had financial consequences, but character is tested when things are difficult and not when they're easy. When you are in business with singular filmmakers, you have to support those filmmakers. That's the choice you've made, the boat you are in. You have to support the captain. A lot of that was bad luck and timing with everything going on in the world, but I believe he made the right decision."
Tarantino states, "They absolutely backed me 100%. They were all disappointed, and so was I. Partly because we had Chinese co-producers and we wanted to do well by them. But there was a certain line you cannot cross. If it was just, okay, Cliff slams Katie's face into a fireplace for..." Sorry. I was trying to read that so nonchalant. I'm like, oh shit. Okay. Oh man. Okay, I can do this. But there's a certain line you cannot cross. If it was just, okay. I don't know. Why does he make this? Oh my gosh, he said, this seems so nonchalant. Okay, Cliff slams Katie's face into the fireplace 4 times. Can we make it 2 times? Oh, okay, I could do that. To actually remove an entire scene because the country finds the scene objectionable? No. It just seems so nonchalant. Why can't we just have him slam her face twice? Oh, okay. No big deal. Whew. All right.
I do love how the first time you read it was just like, okay, slams Katie's face into a fireplace, and then you just paled out.
That's I realized what I was reading. Oh man. Sorry guys, I made it. Okay. Good old Tarantino.
You went full retard, man. Never go full retard.
That is our theory on why Scott Derrickson left the project with Marvel. I believe it becomes a China influence, and I feel now that this new Doctor Strange is probably going to get neutered, and this whole horror aspect is probably going to go by the wayside. They may try to have a couple jump scares, or maybe flickering lights, whatever else type of horror cliche they can have.
At this point, I'm completely expecting the title of the sequel to be Doctor Strange Far From Scary, because it wouldn't surprise me if they just decided to go back to the drawing board and say, well, let's just redo it and have a ton of jokes. That's kind of seems to be Marvel's forte. I would like to be proven wrong, but at this point, who knows? And I agree. I think that's ultimately why Derrickson decided to step away.
All right, that'll end this episode for us, guys. We have a Patreon. If you feel like supporting us in our terrible reading skills, give us some Hooked on Phonics. We could definitely use you over at our Patreon. That link is in the description.
Yeah, we can't afford the phonics now, so any help would be greatly appreciated.
Help us out there. Support us as much as you can. Like, share, and subscribe to this. In case I don't see you.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Donald Trump don't trust China. China is asshole.